Elena never forgot the sound of the champagne smashing against her face. Not the taste, not the cold, the sound. The sharp splash echoed through the ballroom. Victoria Hale's laughter followed, mocking, cruel, slicing through the air. Nearly 300 guests watched in stunned silence. Trash, Victoria called, loud enough for everyone to hear, without an ounce of shame. Elena's hands shook so badly she could barely hold the pen. Still, she signed the divorce papers. Across the room, Marcus Hale stood with his arm wrapped around Bianca Russo. Both of them smiled wide, victorious smiles, as if they had just won something that mattered. And Elena? She was the joke of the night. The girl from the foster home who had dared to dream. The girl who had dared to believe she belonged in their world. A mistake. And tonight, they were erasing her. But there was something no one in that room knew. Not Marcus. Not his heartless mother. Not his arrogant father. Not his spoiled sister. Just 3 hours before that Christmas party, Elena had received a call. One call. A call that would bring the Hale empire crashing down. A call that would strip that family of their power, their pride, and their fortune, and leave them begging for a mercy they had never once shown her. Before we dive in, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell too, because you won't want to miss this story. The laughter echoed in her ears, relentless. The ballroom was a sea of glittering dresses, polished shoes, and expensive suits. And yet, she felt completely exposed. Every glance felt like judgment. Every whisper a dagger. The Hales had always been cruel, but tonight was public. Her mind drifted to the early days. The small apartment, the coffee, the soft laughter they shared. Marcus had wooed her with charm, with promises that felt like they were written for her. For a brief, shining moment, she had believed in it. She had believed in them. But fairy tales didn't survive reality. Not in Marcus's world. In his world, love was conditional, based on appearances, on connections, on power. She looked across the room at Marcus and Bianca. Perfect smiles, perfect poise, pure arrogance. She imagined a photograph of them later, labeled Elena as the discarded one, the mistake. Anger bubbled beneath the sorrow. Disbelief mingled with humiliation. All the hope, all the nights she spent wondering if she belonged, evaporated in a blink. Yet, beneath the hurt, something else stirred. Elena had survived. She had endured their whispers, their cruel jabs, their attempts to erase her. And now, she had a secret they never expected. Just hours ago, the call had come. A voice calm, measured, shocking. A business partner. Evidence of fraud. Mismanagement. Secrets that, if exposed, could destroy the Hale empire. Their fortune, their image, their power. For the first time in years, Elena realized she wasn't powerless. The truth was her weapon, and she intended to use it. The ballroom lights sparkled, but Elena barely noticed. Every whisper, every glance from the crowd, it only fueled her resolve. They didn't know what she held. They couldn't even imagine it. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. Emotion would wait. For now, composure was her shield. Every gesture, every forced smile, everything played into their expectation that she was broken. And tonight, she would let them believe it. Victoria's laughter cut through her memories. Once, Elena had admired her, envied her even. Now, she understood. Admiration from people like Victoria came at a cost. But admiration fades. Power fades. Secrets last forever. The signature on the divorce papers was no longer defeat. It was a start. A quiet opening move in a game the Hales could not win. As she walked through the crowd, head high, she carried her secret silently. Every laugh, every stare, every whisper strengthened her. Tonight, the Hales thought they had won. But Elena? She was just getting started. And when the truth came out, the world would remember the night they underestimated her. Elena slipped quietly into a corner of the ballroom, letting the crowd swallow her figure like she was just another shadow. The laughter, the music, the clinking glasses, it all felt unreal, like she was watching someone else's life play out. Marcus and Bianca moved through the crowd, radiant and untouchable, laughing at jokes Elena didn't even hear. Every smile they shared felt like salt on a wound, but she refused to crumble. Not tonight. Her mind replayed the phone call, over and over, like a movie stuck on the first frame of Revelation. The man on the line had been calm, precise, almost clinical. He had all the evidence she could ever need. Contracts manipulated, offshore accounts, hidden debts, falsified statements. Proof that the Hales weren't untouchable, that their carefully curated world was built on lies. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Elena had always known power could be fleeting, but holding it in her hands now, it was intoxicating. She glanced at Marcus, laughing too easily, the easy charm that had once drawn her and now feeling cheap, manufactured. He didn't know. Not yet. He didn't know that in a few days, everything he had built, everything he had flaunted in this room tonight, could vanish. He thought victory tasted sweet. Elena knew it would taste bitter. Victoria approached her, the sharp heels of her designer shoes clicking against the marble floor. Her eyes sparkled with the satisfaction of dominance. "Elena," she said, voice syrupy mocking. "I hope the divorce process wasn't too painful." She smiled like a predator showing off its teeth. Elena forced herself to meet the gaze, to show a small, polite nod, as if Victoria's cruelty didn't matter. She could almost feel the woman's confusion at the lack of reaction. Little did Victoria know, this was the calm before the storm. Elena took a slow sip of her water, letting the cool liquid settle her nerves. She needed to plan carefully. One wrong move, one visible sign of emotion, and the Hales could sense fear. And fear could make them strike back. She needed patience, strategy, timing. Her eyes scanned the room. The guests were oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, too caught up in their own indulgence. They didn't know that history was about to rewrite itself. For them, it was just another glamorous Christmas party. For Elena, it was the stage for her revenge. 3 hours ago, she had thought about running, about disappearing into the night and letting Marcus and Victoria believe they had won. But the idea of walking away without justice felt hollow. No, she would stay, she would endure. And when the moment came, she would strike where it hurt them most: their reputation, their pride, their fortune. She remembered the nights she had spent in foster homes, moving from one cold, unfamiliar place to another, always feeling like she was invisible, like she didn't belong anywhere. Those nights had taught her resilience. Those nights had forged patience. And tonight, all of that would pay off. She wasn't the same girl Marcus had thought he could humiliate. She was stronger, sharper, smarter. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne flutes, and Elena caught herself staring at the golden liquid. Just a few days ago, it would have been celebratory. Now, it was a symbol of everything she had endured, everything she had survived, and everything she was about to use against the Hales. Her thoughts drifted to Bianca, the new woman in Marcus's life. She was young, beautiful, and oblivious to the secrets she had stepped into. Elena felt no anger toward her. She was just a pawn, a distraction. The real power, the real danger, was in the hands of the Hales themselves. And soon, the empire they had built on arrogance and lies would crumble, and everyone in this room would watch. Elena's phone buzzed quietly in her clutch. A text from the source. "Are you ready?" She smiled faintly, a smile that was nothing like the forced grin she had given Victoria earlier. This one was real. This one held fire. "I'm ready," she typed back. The ballroom's music swelled, the orchestra playing some holiday classic, but all Elena could hear was the beating of her own heart. She thought about how carefully she would reveal what she knew. Timing would be everything. A poorly chosen moment could ruin the impact, could tip the scales in Marcus's favor. She needed control. And control, she realized, was more intoxicating than any victory she had imagined. A few guests moved closer, curious about her demeanor. She met their eyes, smiled politely, and let them pass. Every step she took, every subtle gesture, was calculated. Elena was no longer just surviving this world. She was learning it, studying it, preparing to dismantle it from the inside out. And then she saw it. Marcus, leaning in too close to Bianca, whispering something that made her laugh. The sight, which would have broken her heart before, now only fueled her determination. He had no idea. None. His empire was built on lies, and she held the truth. One phone call, one revelation, one strategic move, and everything he had relied on would be gone. Elena glanced at the clock. The party would go on for hours, long enough for her to set the pieces in place. She was patient, and patience was her ally. Every laugh, every cheer, every whispered comment was part of the illusion. The Hales believed they were untouchable, and that, Elena thought, would be their downfall. As she walked back toward the center of the room, head held high, her thoughts were clear. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about justice. About proving that resilience and intelligence could overcome arrogance and cruelty. She would take everything they had relied on for granted and expose it to the world. And when that moment came, the shock, the disbelief, the regret, it would all be worth it. Tonight, Elena realized she was no longer a victim. She was a force, and the Hales had no idea what was coming. Elena moved through the crowd like a shadow, unnoticed yet fully aware. Every laugh, every cheer, every clinking glass reminded her that she was still invisible to them. But invisible was exactly what she needed. If Marcus and the Hales thought she was broken, that she had nothing, that she had been defeated, they were about to learn how wrong they were. She found a quiet corner near the fireplace, away from prying eyes, and pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled for just a moment, not from fear, but anticipation. Every message she sent tonight had to be precise. One wrong word, one misstep, and the moment could slip away, leaving her back where she started, humiliated, powerless. She took a deep breath and hit send. A flurry of responses came almost immediately. Names she had never expected to reach out. Lawyers, journalists, insiders, all tipped off by her careful arrangements earlier in the week. She had spent days preparing, quietly gathering evidence and allies, making sure that the truth could not be ignored. And now, she was ready. The Hale Empire, so proud, so untouchable in their eyes, was about to face a storm of consequences they had never imagined. From across the room, she watched Marcus, completely unaware. He leaned in to whisper something to Bianca, and she laughed, a carefree laugh that had once drawn Elena in, and now only fueled her determination. The irony was delicious. He thought tonight was a victory. He had no idea the foundation of his world was already cracking beneath him. Victoria's sharp eyes caught Elena's for a moment. Elena looked away quickly, pretending to check her drink, but the smallest spark of triumph flickered inside her. Victoria believed she had Elena cornered, humiliated, and defeated. That belief would be her undoing. Then it started. Subtle at first. A soft murmur here, a surprised gasp there. Elena's messages had begun to spread. A journalist she had tipped off earlier whispered a question into a glassy-eyed socialite's ear. A lawyer she trusted made a subtle move that would soon bring the Hale's finances under scrutiny. Nothing public yet, just the first tremors of what was to come. And Elena? She smiled quietly to herself, savoring the feeling of power she had never known. Her mind wandered back to the nights she had spent alone, moving from one foster home to another, always wondering if she was worth anything. She remembered the ridicule, the judgment, the feeling of being disposable. And now, standing in the glittering ballroom, she realized that every hardship, every tear, every whispered insult had prepared her for this moment. She was no longer invisible. She was unstoppable. She allowed herself a glance at Marcus again. The arrogance, the charm, the smug certainty, it was all there, laid bare, and it made her blood boil. He had used her. He had lied, manipulated, and controlled. And tonight, he would learn that the one person he underestimated the most would be the one who brought everything crashing down. A hush spread through a small circle of guests nearby, a ripple that grew faster with each passing minute. Elena didn't need to see what was happening. She could feel it. Whispers of doubt, surprise, and curiosity spreading like wildfire. The Hales, surrounded by luxury and power, were blind to the first signs of their own unraveling. Victoria approached again, this time with her mask of polite concern. "Elena, are you feeling all right? You look tense." She tried to sound sweet, but Elena could hear the venom underneath. She gave a calm smile, her voice steady. "I'm fine. Thank you. No more. No less. Just enough to hide the storm brewing beneath." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly, sensing something, but she couldn't place it. Elena's phone buzzed again. Another confirmation. The first domino had fallen. Internal leaks, confidential documents, emails, all now in trusted hands. The Hales empire was not just vulnerable, it was exposed. Every day of deceit, every manipulation, every lie, soon to be public knowledge. And Elena? She would watch it unfold from her quiet corner, untouchable. Marcus laughed loudly, catching everyone's attention, but Elena barely noticed. He looked powerful, untouchable, but that was about to change. She could almost imagine his face when the truth hit. The smug, charming man who thought he had won tonight would crumble under the weight of his own lies. And then came the first real shock. A senior associate from the Hales company approached a small group, voice low, urgent, urgent enough that even Marcus perked up. Elena watched from a distance, pulse quickening, eyes widened. Conversations paused. Phones were pulled out. The first whispers of scandal had begun to seep into the party, invisible to most, but lethal for the Hales. Elena leaned back, letting it all sink in. The fear, the confusion, the first taste of chaos. She felt alive, electrified. For so long, she had been powerless, invisible, dismissed. Tonight, everything had changed. She hadn't just survived, she had outsmarted them all. Yet she remained cautious. The storm was only beginning. Timing was everything. She couldn't reveal everything too soon. She had to watch them squirm, feel the tension, taste the dread that would eventually consume them completely. She took a slow breath, centering herself. This was her moment, and she would make it unforgettable. The room, still sparkling with holiday lights and laughter, held no idea that it had just entered the eye of a storm. The Hales believed they were untouchable, that the evening was theirs to enjoy. But Elena knew better. Every move, every smile, every whispered secret was part of the grand design. And soon, the empire that had humiliated her, mocked her, tried to erase her, would be forced to bow to the truth she held. Elena's phone buzzed one last time. The signal was clear. The next wave was ready. Documents, evidence, and insider revelations would soon surface, and there would be no hiding. She slid the phone back into her clutch, letting a small, satisfied smile curl her lips. Tonight, she had already won more than they could imagine. And soon, the world would see it too. The music continued to play, cheerful and oblivious, but Elena no longer heard it. The room shimmered with holiday lights, laughter, and sparkling glasses, yet beneath it all, a storm was quietly brewing. Guests whispered in corners, phones were pulled out, and eyes darted around, trying to make sense of the murmurs. The Hale Empire, so meticulously polished, was starting to crack, and no one could stop it. Elena stood at the edge of the crowd, calm and collected. Her hands rested lightly on her clutch, but inside, her heart raced. Every subtle movement of Marcus, every glance from Victoria, every frown of the onlookers confirmed one undeniable truth. The Hales had no idea what had just begun. She could see Marcus's confident smile falter slightly. His hand tightened around Bianca's as if seeking reassurance. But even that couldn't shield him from what was coming. It started small, a whisper here, a raised eyebrow there. The first socialite had discreetly stepped aside to make a call. Then another. A few minutes later, someone else excused themselves, glancing nervously toward Marcus and Victoria. Elena could see the panic beginning to flicker across their faces. The room, once filled with certainty and celebration, now held tension thick enough to taste. Victoria, ever sharp, sensed something wrong. Her laughter faltered for a split second, replaced with a cautious frown. She approached Marcus, voice low but insistent. "Marcus, did you see that?" But Marcus shook his head, trying to dismiss it. He had no idea the web of revelations had already started to spread, all originating from Elena's careful orchestration. Elena's lips curled into a faint smile. The first wave had hit, but the real storm was about to arrive. She could see Victoria struggling to maintain control, flustered, while Marcus tried to project confidence. Every second that passed heightened the tension, and every glance from the crowd reminded the Hales that their perfect world was crumbling. Then came the public moment. A well-connected journalist, tipped off earlier by Elena, approached a small group in front of the grand staircase. She held a folder of documents, whispers spreading quickly. Within minutes, phones were recording, messages were being sent, and the crowd began to murmur loudly, eyes flicking toward Marcus and Victoria. "What is happening?" a guest whispered. This can't be true," another said, staring at their phone. Elena's chest tightened, not from fear, but anticipation. She had waited for this moment, orchestrated it perfectly. The room's atmosphere shifted. What was once celebration became chaos disguised as curiosity. The Hales had no idea that the people they considered loyal were now questioning everything. Marcus moved toward the journalist, attempting to regain control. His smile, once confident, faltered. "I assure you, there's been some mistake," he said, voice tight. But the murmurs only grew louder. Evidence of fraud, mismanagement, and manipulation had started circulating. Names, figures, and documents that no one outside the inner circle should have seen were now public, and the crowd's reaction reflected it. Shock, disbelief, and the first taste of judgment. Victoria's panic became more visible. Her carefully constructed poise cracked, revealing a flicker of genuine fear. The woman who had mocked Elena mercilessly was now powerless, just another guest watching her family empire unravel in real time. Elena remained composed. She didn't move to confront them. She didn't need to. The chaos did her work for her. Every whisper, every shocked expression, every nervous glance at Marcus and Victoria reinforced the truth. The Hales were vulnerable, exposed, and finally accountable. Bianca clung to Marcus, confusion and worry etched across her face. She had no idea the life she had stepped into was built on lies. Lies Elena was now revealing. For Marcus, this was more than humiliation. It was the collapse of his identity, the shattering of the illusion of control he had cultivated for years. Elena's phone buzzed again. Another confirmation. The documents had reached financial regulators. The evidence she had carefully collected, with the help of trusted allies, had set off a chain reaction that could no longer be stopped. Every move, every attempt by the Hales to control the narrative, would be too little, too late. She let herself relax slightly, though her eyes never left Marcus and Victoria. She had been mocked, humiliated, and underestimated. But tonight, the script had flipped. The power dynamic had shifted. Elena wasn't just surviving anymore. She was victorious. And the best part? The Hales would have to watch it unfold, helpless, while the world looked on. The guests were now openly whispering, some stepping back in disbelief, others pulling out phones to record the scene. Marcus, sweating slightly under the bright ballroom lights, tried to regain his composure. "Everyone, please, this is being blown out of proportion," he said, voice cracking. But no one was listening. The damage had already been done. Elena's careful planning, patience, and intelligence had orchestrated a moment that would be remembered for years. Victoria, realizing the tide had turned, finally confronted Elena across the room. "You? How could you?" she hissed, her voice shaking, a mixture of fury and fear. Elena met her gaze steadily. "I survived your cruelty, Victoria. I learned from it. And tonight, I took control. The truth has a way of speaking louder than your laughter." Victoria's face paled. Marcus opened his mouth, perhaps to intervene, but even he realized the moment was out of their hands. Elena had turned their world upside down with nothing but patience, strategy, and a single phone call. The whispers spread faster now. Social media posts were already circulating, capturing expressions of shock, panic, and disbelief. Guests could hardly process the magnitude of what had just been revealed. The Hales, so used to commanding attention, now found themselves powerless, exposed, and humiliated in front of the very people they thought they had controlled. Elena's chest swelled with a quiet, victorious pride. This was more than revenge. This was justice. The empire that had tried to erase her, demean her, and mock her existence was finally facing consequences. And she had done it with dignity, patience, and precision. For the first time that night, she allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. The storm was far from over, but tonight had already marked the beginning of the Hales' undoing. And as the music continued, the guests oblivious to the real drama unfolding, Elena knew one thing for certain. She would never be underestimated again. The room had changed completely. Where once there had been laughter, confidence, and sparkling glamour, now there was tension, whispers, and shocked faces. Elena stood near the grand staircase, her posture calm, her expression serene. Every eye in the room was on the Hale family, but the focus wasn't on their power anymore. It was on the cracks she had exposed, the empire they had built on lies, and the truth she now held in her hands. Marcus's face had turned pale, the charming smile replaced by disbelief and fear. He tried to speak, to regain control, but every word faltered under the weight of exposure. The documents Elena had released, the evidence she had distributed, and the insider confirmations she had orchestrated were everywhere now. No amount of charm, excuses, or pleading could undo what had been set in motion. Victoria Hale, the cruel, untouchable socialite who had delighted in humiliating Elena just hours before, was trembling. Her usual poise shattered, her carefully constructed mask of superiority stripped away by the truth Elena had unleashed. She had mocked, belittled, and humiliated Elena, calling her trash in front of hundreds. Now, for the first time, Victoria was powerless. She had underestimated the girl she had tried to erase, and it had been her greatest mistake. Bianca Russo clung to Marcus, confusion and panic written across her face. She had no idea of the web she had entered, no understanding of the manipulations and secrets that had sustained Marcus's world. And as Elena watched, she realized Bianca was only a pawn, innocent yet caught in a storm she hadn't seen coming. Elena's phone buzzed quietly. A final confirmation: regulators were investigating, journalists were drafting reports, and key associates were distancing themselves from the Hales. Everything was falling into place exactly as she had planned. She didn't need to lift a finger. The storm had taken on a life of its own, fueled by truth and her careful orchestration. The guests began murmuring louder. Phones out, cameras snapping. Social media would explode within minutes. The whispers spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the room. Marcus tried to rally some semblance of authority, but it was useless. Every movement, every gesture of control, only drew more attention to his faltering grip on the situation. Elena walked slowly through the room, calm and composed. Every step was deliberate, every glance purposeful. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to act. Her presence alone, serene and unbroken, contrasted sharply with the chaos surrounding the Hales. The girl they had tried to humiliate, the foster home orphan they had mocked, was now untouchable in her dignity and undeniable in her triumph. Victoria finally confronted her, trembling with rage and fear. You can't do this," she hissed, her voice sharp yet quivering. Elena met her gaze evenly, voice calm, controlled. "I already have, Victoria. The truth doesn't need anyone's permission. It just exists. And now, so does everyone else." Marcus's voice cracked as he tried to intervene. "Elena, please, this isn't the way." But Elena didn't let him finish. She had nothing to prove to him anymore. The empire he had leaned on for power was crumbling. The people he had manipulated were questioning, doubting, exposing him. And for the first time, he could not charm his way out. He could not bully, intimidate, or charm. Elena had won with patience, intelligence, and courage. The whispers turned to murmurs, then to shocked conversations, then to outright chatter. Key investors, socialites, and journalists were now openly discussing the Hale family scandals in real time. The empire, the pride, the fortune they had relied upon for decades was now public knowledge. And the woman they had tried to destroy? She was standing tall, untouched by the humiliation they had once delighted in. Elena thought back to the champagne, the laughter, the cruel word that had cut her heart. Trash, Victoria had called her. Now, Elena smiled inwardly. She wasn't trash. She was the storm. She was the reckoning. And she had survived it all. Her eyes scanned the room one last time. Marcus slumped slightly, defeated, while Victoria's face remained pale, filled with fear and disbelief. Bianca had gone silent, unsure where to look or how to react. And the guests? They were witnesses to something far greater than a Christmas party. They were witnessing justice, orchestrated by someone they had underestimated, someone they had mocked. Elena's hands, steady now, rested lightly on her clutch. She took a deep breath, letting the tension and triumph wash over her. For so long, she had been invisible, powerless, mocked, and dismissed. Tonight, she had flipped the script entirely. She had turned humiliation into power, weakness into strength, and invisibility into undeniable presence. She moved toward the exit slowly, her every step deliberate, every motion a statement. No words were needed. The room followed her in silence, eyes tracking the girl who had become untouchable. Elena didn't need to gloat. She didn't need revenge. She had justice, and that was far sweeter. As she reached the doors, she glanced back one last time. The Hales were left to deal with the aftermath of their own arrogance and cruelty. The empire they had built on lies was now cracking before their very eyes. And Elena? She was free, strong, resilient, victorious. Outside, the cold night air hit her face, but it felt refreshing, invigorating. For the first time in her life, she felt completely, utterly in control. The past, pain, humiliation, betrayal, was behind her. And the future? That was hers to write. The Christmas lights of the city sparkled like a promise, reflecting off the snow, and Elena smiled. Tonight was more than a victory. It was a declaration. No one could underestimate her ever again. The storm she had become would never be ignored.